Over the past several weeks, we've been experimenting with a few different variations of winter sowing, and our goal has been threefold. First, to confirm that winter sowing works as well as other people say it does. Second, to determine which of the options we like best. And finally, to compare this new hands-off approach to our usual method of starting seedlings indoors under grow lights. Now, I promised that I'd keep you updated along the way just as soon as we had any actual results to show you. And so today, I'd like to do just that. And we'll start off with the jug method, since those were the ones that led us down this path in the first place. The bulk of our seeds were started and placed outside on March 20th, when there was still plenty of snow on the ground and the average temperatures were well below freezing. For this main experiment, we planted 13 different types of vegetables, herbs, and flowers. Now, I should note that we also started a single jug of kale seeds 2 days earlier on the 18th. So while we have one container for each of the rest of the plants, we actually have two for the kale. And since this initial sowing, we've not yet watered them, opened the lids, or helped them out in any other way except for adding a few pieces of scrap wood around their base to stop them from blowing over in the wind. More on that in a moment. Next came the direct winter sowing, where we started kale, spinach, and romaine lettuce in a thin layer of potting mix that was poured onto an otherwise still snow-covered garden bed. One batch under plastic domes, and one batch buried under snow. Both of these methods were sown on March 28th, just over a week after the jugs. And once again, we've not yet watered them, but as you'll see, we did have to do some very minor maintenance. Then, for the first couple of weeks, not much happened, at least not as far as the seeds were concerned. But the weather, on the other hand, continued doing its thing. On March 29th, one day after direct sowing, the snow that I had used to cover the domeless seeds had completely melted, and the name tags that I had shoved into that snow had fallen over as well, even though the surrounding garden bed was still completely covered. I'm assuming that this was because the disturbed snow was much less tightly packed and therefore easier to melt. Plus, some of the soil actually got mixed into that snow as well, so perhaps the darker color just absorbed more heat from the sun. But either way, I decided to cover them back up with fresh snow in order to keep it consistent with the rest of the garden. Oh, and I also used some extra snow around the domes to keep them from blowing away, because the wind had already begun to pick up. But by the next day, the snow had all completely melted again, so after that, I just left them alone. Our final snowfall, for the time being at least, came on March 31st, though it didn't really amount to much. Then, a couple days later, on April 2nd, one of the seeds in our first jug of kale began to sprout, just 2 weeks plus a day after sowing. And then, by the 4th, there were several more. But over in the garden, there was nothing. In fact, by then, all of the snow had melted and the domes had blown away completely. Thank goodness for our fence, or else I'd likely have been searching for them across our field. So it was then that I decided to add some permanent weights to the domes, one more use for our ever-growing collection of rocks. On April 5th, the weather struck again, with an entire day's worth of freezing rain. This was enough to cause severe power outages throughout parts of Ontario and Quebec, but luckily for our domed seedlings, they never noticed a thing. On April 9th, we discovered that the kale, Brussels sprouts, romaine lettuce, and broccoli that were started in the jugs on March 20th finally began to sprout as well. That's 1 day short of 3 weeks. And much to our surprise, it was that same day that we first noticed some romaine lettuce that was direct sown under the domes in the garden only 12 days earlier. And that brings us to today, April 15th. 4 weeks after starting the first jug of kale, 26 days after starting the rest of the jugs, and 18 days after direct sowing in the garden. And I'm happy to report that 9 of the 13 jugs have now sprouted at least one seed, all except the lavender, sweet peas, nasturtium, and Swiss chard. And almost everything has begun to sprout in the garden as well, but I'm a bit confused. You see, under the domes, the kale is looking good, as is the romaine lettuce. And without the domes, the kale and lettuce have sprouted too, albeit much less and much smaller. But next to them, the spinach is nowhere to be seen. So I'd assume that it just hadn't germinated yet. Except that when I checked the spinach under the dome, not only are there plenty of spinach sprouts, but there are also a pile of other sprouts that are, well, not spinach. So while trying to sow and film at the same time, I'd clearly messed something up. But since the kale and lettuce look pretty much the same at this point, I'm not even sure which one I accidentally planted twice. And given that mistake, I'm also not completely confident that I hadn't simply missed the non-domed spinach as well. So that could explain its no-show status. But in both cases, I guess I'm just gonna have to wait a little bit longer to find out. Anyway, now let's quickly talk about my first impressions about these methods as of this initial update. At this point, I'd say that barring my own mishaps, all three of these methods have been pretty successful so far. Most of the jugs are doing really well, and while there's no true leaves yet, so far all of the tiny plants are looking pretty healthy. And for the kale, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, romaine lettuce, and broccoli, the germination rate seems pretty close to 100%, while the rest is about 50% or less. So I think overseeding these was a good call. In a couple of cases you can see that all of the sprouts are on one side, but I think that's because the jugs had blown over before we stabilized them with the scrap wood. And some of the soil is just now starting to look a little dry, so I think it would be a good time to finally give them a bit of water. But that's the first time during the entire 4 weeks. Remember, until now they've only had rain and melting snow, as well as any retained moisture from that initially dampened soil. Plus, it's been unseasonably warm this past week, so perhaps they could have gone even longer without water under more normal conditions. But the germination rate over in the garden is certainly a lot less so far, especially for the domeless seeds. But frankly, I'm kind of impressed that they even germinated at all. Plus, as soon as the snow melted, we noticed the remnants of quite a few rodent tunnels. So it's also possible that some of the seeds had already been eaten before they even had a chance to get started. And as I said, this is still way earlier than we'd normally begin direct sowing. In fact, we're just now getting started on many of these types of seeds in the basement. So overall, I'm really happy with winter sowing so far. But a lot can change over the next couple of months, so we'll of course keep you updated as things progress. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and we'll see you soon.